Hello, Simon. Thank you for joining me. Could you just tell everybody who you are and what you do, please?
Absolutely, my pleasure to be here. My name is Simon Raybould. If you want to be really formal and grown up about it, it's Dr. Simon Raybould, but nobody uses that except when they're making a hotel reservation. What do? I am a presentation skills trainer, which means that I help people, particularly newly promoted people, talk about what it is that they do. So I help them stand at the front of the meeting room and sound intelligent, get the message across, and do it with a lot less anxiety than most people experience.
Cool. Thank you very much. So I know you've got a podcast, the Air Productivity Podcast. What made you decide to start that?
It's largely an experiment, let's be honest. Because, podcast doesn't suit the medium of presentations because it tends to be very, very visible. And I wanted to get myself a little bit better known. I wanted to find out what it was like to podcast. I wanted to actually, frankly, and this is going to sound like I am such a Boy Scout, I wanted to get some of the stuff that is known about making an impact and being productive out into the world in a different way. You see, for me, it's, the reason I go for the presentation stuff is not presentations for presentation's sake. I go for presentations because that's a way of making an impact. It's a way of people changing the world around them. And so it's being productive. The things kind of sit together really, really quite well. The more productive you are, the more heads you can bang together, the more you can change of the world. And there is a lot of research about how to be productive that never actually makes it its way out into the world. There's a whole load of, oh, hang on, can I swear?
Yeah, go on, it's fine.
Go on. There's a whole lot of bollocks out there on the internet. But the research is very clear and very different. And I found that podcast was a really easy and comfortable medium for me to explain some of those things.
Cool. So who are your typical listeners, or are they not typical? Do you find you've got all kinds of different people joining in?
It's quite difficult to get details of them. All I can give you is generalized demographics. Mm-hmm. They tend to be self-employed.
Yep.
And they tend to be people, or people like the self-employed, who have got some kind of agency. That's the jargon term for they have some kind of control over when they do things.
So are they? So is this? Was this unexpected? Because what you were describing was people who are newly promoted, which you would assume would be in a workplace. But your listeners, as you've described, don't sound like that at all.
Nope. I was aiming much more for people who were in, for example, middle management, and I found that there are quite a few of those. Absolutely, quite a few of those. But there's also a lot of people who are. The thing that binds them all together is that they've got a lot of pressures on them from a lot of different directions, but they do have some control over what they do when. Mm-hmm. So we are not talking about people on production lines where everything is primer, cocker, setter, detonator, primer, cocker, setter, detonator.
Yeah.
Are you old enough to remember that?
No, I'm just being polite. No. Don't worry, continue.
Okay, fine. Okay. So they're not on the factory floor. They're not on conveyor belt stuff. They've got some kind of choice about how long they spend on any given topic. Mm-hmm. And typically they also have jobs that are open-ended, mm-hmm. where there is never any done. There's never any finished.
Yes, I know how that feels.
Yeah, absolutely. We're all kind of there. So it's the self-employed and the newly promoted and middle managers, the people that are sort of caught in the middle of too much to do, but with a little control over when they do things.
So do you think that you've attracted the self-employed because of the fact that you're quite well known both in the Northeast and nationally because of your work with the PSA and things like that? Do you think people are coming in the hopes of benefiting from your wisdom and experience, and that's kind of pulling in people who weren't the demographic you imagined, but they've arrived anyway?
As far as the stats can confirm for me, about 2/3 of my Productivity Aircast listeners are not from the UK. So those people you've just identified, sort of, I'm quite well known in the UK, as you say, for my presentation stuff and my books and so on. But actually, slightly over 2/3 of my listeners come from overseas, largely from America. Now, I think that is because podcasting is about 5 years older in America than it is in the UK. It's more normal to listen to podcasts in the UK. Quite a few in Singapore, some in China. I have no idea why. I would have thought my accent would have been quite impenetrable to anybody from.
They're probably just excited that something slipped under the radar, you know, and they've gone, oh, there's somebody we can listen to.
Yeah, so I think those people that I've spoken to, now at this point I'm going to give you anecdote rather than data. Those people I've spoken to have found me, tended to have found me via reputation or by LinkedIn or by my social media work.
Interesting.
Particularly the overseas ones, as you say.
Yeah. So, and what kind of value are you giving your listeners? What are you sharing with them?
How to get more done without losing your sanity. That's so the strapline is basically any cretin can get more done by getting up before they went to bed the previous night.
Yep.
Okay, in the short term at least, anybody can just work harder and get more done. Yep. But there comes a point where you have to work a little bit smarter. So a lot of the tools that I'm talking about are things like, well, the really simple stuff is things like, do you know what, there's no point in working a 9-hour day because your brain goes after about 6. So you might as well just stop after 6 and do something different. So it's really simple stuff about how to get more done and how to have more fun while you're doing it.
Brilliant. So how does your podcast help you stand out from say the other presentation trainers or anything like that? What is it that makes a difference?
Very few presentation trainers are doing podcasts. Very rarely. Yeah. There are anybody out there who's ever done a presentation and done it well fancies that they can do presentations training, and that's bollocks, right? Mm-hmm. But very few of them actually go as far as doing a podcast because presentations is very much a face-to-face thing.
Yeah.
Training is very much in the room. I mean, I've got online training courses and I think they're great, but they're not as good as face-to-face training.
Yeah.
So very few of them have actually gone as far as podcasting. Mm-hmm. There are some, but not many. And the beauty of it for me is that it shows my audience two things. The first is it shows them a little bit of my style and my personality, so that if they approach me, they are much more likely to be the kind of person with whom I want to work.
Sure.
Because I've used the word bollocks twice now, 3 times on this interview, and they know that that's the kind of thing I'm going to do. So it's actually it reduced the number of people I got coming to me saying, "Simon, will you work with me?"
Yeah.
What it did not reduce was the number of people coming to me and saying, "Simon, will you work with me?" with whom I ended up working.
Right.
Does that make sense? It filtered out the false negatives, the false positives. Sorry, from you. Yeah. So they get a feel for the style, and the other thing, of course, it does is it proves my credentials as a researcher and as a scientist. Mm-hmm. Because presentations training is full of people who just make crap up and go, 7% of communication is about the words you used. Right? I'm going to slap them all because it's so wrong, it's unbelievable. So when you actually give them proper research-based stuff, they go, okay, right, this man knows his stuff. This man has done the research. This man has read the research papers. This man understands the statistics. And it gives me credibility and authority.
Yeah. So apart from that, obviously the credibility, which is massive, especially in this age of personal branding and that sort of thing, what other benefits have you seen to your business, either directly from somebody contacting you after an episode or indirectly?
I've had a couple of bits of work from it, and the podcast is not very old, but I've had a couple of bits of work from it. Even with small listen numbers, I've had a couple of bits of work from it. That's I was quite pleasantly surprised, and I've had quite a few things that might turn into work. In that, so what I've done is started relationships.
Sure.
And that's, to be honest, that's pretty much what you can ask of social media. You get people interested, you get them to talk to you. And then it's up to you as a real person to convince them that they want to buy stuff.
That's it. Yeah. Yeah, that's really interesting. And it is that thing about know, like, and trust. And, if people are hearing you once a week or once a fortnight, then they really do feel like they know you, which I think it's hard for me to say this as a writer, but you get more of your personality over when you're speaking. I think it can be a bit more natural if you're not a writer.
Yeah. Okay. And now the other thing about the other advantage of podcasts over the written word, for me at least, is that podcasts are more intimate.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, they're sitting there with me in their ears while they're running or walking or at the gym or whatever.
Yeah.
So you become much more a part of their personal life.
Yeah.